Hey guys, what's up? It's the Annotator. Before I get to the review, I wanted to ask you to please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'm only posting 2 to 3 videos on a weekly basis, and if you don't have the notification bell clicked, you're not even going to get a notification when I do post a new video, so it shouldn't be a burden to you. If you have any interest in my views or my opinions on cinema, it would mean a lot to me to subscribe. It would also help other people find the channel more easily. So if you haven't done that already, please do that for me. It would mean a lot. And with all that said, let's get to Color Out of Space, a new bonkers psychedelic horror film from Richard Stanley, who's a very weird cult icon who wears a Crocodile Dundee hat like literally all the time. This is Stanley's first narrative feature film since 1992. Kind of. He was actually technically fired from a 1996 film starring Marlon Brando, but both that information and that movie are irrelevant, so shame on me for bringing it up. Not really sure why I did. So Color Out of Space, just this past weekend, got its limited theatrical release. It's technically a 2019 film, as it premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival in September. Does any of this actually matter? Not really, but his last feature film was released 17 years ago. And guess what? That makes sense because this movie does not make any sense. And this intro sucks, I realize that, but we march ahead undeterred. Okay, real quick, since I have them as segments that I regularly disregard or just forget about completely, as far as recommending this film, ultimately I think it's a near-miss failure, so no, I'm not going to recommend it. However, it's probably going to gain some cult status momentum here and should be pretty enjoyable to most fans of trippy horror movies and a Wicker Man-style Nick Cage.
What is it? What is that? What is it? Oh, no, not the beast! Not the beast! Ah! Open my eyes! My eyes! Ah! Ah!
So there's some value there. Okay, let's dig in. Here's the good. Stanley is incredibly aware of Nick Cage's second life as the most entertaining and memeable B-movie absurdist performer of this generation. A recent article on The Ringer posited Nick Cage's career renovation to be a modern Vincent Price corollary, and I think that that's pretty astute. Stanley really leans into this in a pretty meta way, and it's fun, and I appreciated that aspect. Also, the film masterfully establishes a visual tone right away during the opening credits before things start getting colorful that incites palpable tension and apprehension, and the score by Colin Stetson, who also did the score for Hereditary, which was excellent. He's a household name to any Pitchfork readers. He carries this tone through the finale. It's a tremendous score. However, I have some issues with the writing. The writing here, it definitely has some problems, and I wanted to dig into those. They kind of pulled me out of the experience. So I've given some extra thought to how I wanted to discuss my feelings about the writing in this movie because I don't think that it's terrible. And actually, in some ways, it's pretty good. But outside of some lazy script choices, which of course I'll mention, it does one thing in particular that gravely dilutes its impact and eventually unsuspended my disbelief, which was kind of critical in terms of my enjoyment of the film. The story is a pretty faithful adaptation of an H.P. Lovecraft short story from 1927, in which a surveyor visits a small town to investigate unsubstantiated claims of an alien incident that supposedly took place 40 years earlier. Okay? In that tale, a meteorite crashes into a farm and slowly infects the land and drives the family to madness. Okay, that sounds pretty sweet, right? Well, here's what I believe is the fatal flaw of Stanley's adaptation. In Lovecraft's story, the tale is told to the surveyor by an old local whom the townspeople think is crazy, and again, it's a retelling of an event that supposedly occurred 4 decades prior. In Stanley's film, he removes this plot device and just shows us the events that are described by the old man in the short story. The result is, when the story stops making sense or starts introducing concepts that haven't been established or set up in any way, it's absent the safety net of the questionable narrator, the old man in the short story. It's just confounding and not in a way that cinematically reflects the character's predicaments. It's pulled me out of the experience. Another minor gripe is that the film willingly abandoned the short story's timeless perusal of what it means to be a farmer in America, often isolated, unappreciated, a menial working class in a society that doesn't have time for ruralists. In the film, the family aren't farmers. They move to a farm after the wife is diagnosed with cancer. Lovecraft isn't necessarily known for social commentary in his works, but the 1920s were famously lucrative for the American economy, called the Roaring Twenties. precipitating the Great Depression, of course, and infamously catastrophic for American farmers who suffered plummeting farmland values and mounting debt from expensive machinery that they had to purchase in order to produce crops at a competitive rate. The old man in the short story was an artifact from an event that ruined a farming family. The titular color, the color out of space, the alien force, perhaps a surrogate for the economy or social exclusion in an old man's shaky memory. And that's the meat and potatoes of the short story. In the movie, we see a family ruined, but there's no discourse whatsoever. It's just, this happens, and it's weird. The family dynamics in the film are fleshed out pretty well, but the family members are also knee-jerk stereotypes, probably because Stanley was preoccupied with all the wacky shit in the third act to care about each family member. The girl's a heathen teenager who hates her parents and gets a crush. The oldest boy's an aloof dope smoker. The youngest boy's a fragile dweeb. These are all tropes that we've seen countless times in movies. A movie like this relies on our emotional investment in each victim of the inevitable madness, and it's tough to like characters we feel like we've seen depicted 1,000 times in films already. Cage transcends this with his craziness, obviously, but that doesn't remedy the flaws of the script. I'm grading the story and the plot a neutral, structure and pace a plus, characters and dialogue both a neutral, cinematography a plus, directing a plus, editing and VFX a plus, and the score a plus. Final thoughts here. Stanley's adaptation is admirably aware of itself as batshit B-movie slop, but its changes to the source forfeit essential allegory, mystery, and viewer engagement. I'm going to give this movie a 5 out of 10. Okay, all done. On to the next one. Before you go, if you made it to this point in the video, which is highly unlikely, and if you didn't heed my pleads at the beginning of this video, you might as well just click the damn like and subscribe buttons for me so that I stop begging for them in future videos. And that's all. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Here are some other review videos for you.